Alright, so now we're on to our section on egoism. We're going to focus mainly, specifically on Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand, fairly prominent in the news these days, believe it or not. Many congressmen now in the U.S. Congress citing Rand as one of their favorite philosophers, or they believe in her principles, and think that she has set forth a proper model for governance, economics, etc. So it's interesting to look at a few of the things that Rand actually thinks and how that impacts one's moral behavior. So egoism, basically the assertion that one's own self-interest and ego, right, the self, is a priority when making moral decisions. So there's Ayn Rand. She moves to the United States from Russia in 1925, 1926 to pursue a career in screenwriting. She writes many famous works. The two most famous, of course, Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead. Many economists cite her as an influence. You may recall Alan Greenspan, really in the news under Clinton's administration for how well, cited with helping to cause such a surplus under Clinton, and then Greenspan again when we had that economic collapse in 07, 08. Actually, Greenspan called before Congress and asked what happened. And there, funny enough, he said that those fundamentals of the economy that he thought were true, or not, that perhaps there was a flaw there. Anyway, so back to Rand. Rand's system, her ethical system, is called Objectivism. And the central tenet of Objectivism is this, specifically. Two things to take note of here. First, it's not just your self-interest, right? It is your rational self-interest and happiness. And so that's your highest moral goal, is to achieve your own self-interest and happiness. Objectivism will reject altruism. Altruism, kind of the other side of the egoism coin. Altruism tells us that we should do for others primarily, that our own self-interest should be second to the needs of others. That's altruism. Collectivism, that's going to be socialism or communism, any sort of economic structure or governance where individual liberty is restricted for the benefit of the whole. And then thirdly, mixed economies. What does that mean? That's going to be any sort of government regulation in the economy. That for Rand, she takes what she thinks to be a strict Adam Smith sort of stand in terms of the economy, that it should be laissez-faire, right? That her belief was that if everyone works to benefit themselves, works towards his or her own benefit and self-interest, that as we individually move up, right, closer to our own happiness, that others will do the same, as long as we're all working towards that same goal, which is an individual self-interest. Okay, for Rand's starting point, it's going to be Kant again. We're back to Kant. And we talked, when we discussed Immanuel Kant, how after Kant, really, philosophy splits into a million pieces. So for Rand, Kant is her jumping off point, and it's going to be that second formulation of the categorical imperative that gives rise to her concept of objectivism and how her ethical theory can be considered objective. So recall, the second formulation of the categorical imperative notes that we are not allowed to treat another rational thinking thing as a means to an end, that rational creatures are ends in themselves. So man is an end in himself. That is, man is valuable simply because he exists. So, when we think about altruism, sacrificing ourselves for the benefit of someone else, Rand would argue that this violates that second formulation of the categorical imperative because we are treating a rational thinking thing as a means to someone else's end. It just so happens that that rational thinking thing is ourselves. So she thinks that altruism and self-sacrifice violate the second formulation of the categorical imperative, that we are in fact using ourselves as a means. Okay, now one important thing that you'll need to know is how it is she can call her moral theory objectivism, right? If you recall, we talked about objective truth, relative truth, subjective truth. Well, here she's taking this concept and actually naming her theory objectivism. So this is kind of a basic, brief argument for how she can call her ethical theory objectivism. Right, so first, values follow from the existence of a valuing thing. What does that mean? Well, that we are rational thinking things, right? So we create those values. Those values are created based on what is required for us to survive, right? So I deem a particular thing of value because it will help perpetuate my life. So because all people wish to survive, she can call her theory objectivism, right? That it is true for everyone, she imagines. Okay, so her argument against altruism, and this you read in your textbook, that she believes altruism to be, in fact, not just bad, but suicidal. And so this is her argument for how altruism can be considered suicidal. So the starting point is that we all want to survive, and we should do those things that will encourage our own individual survival, right? So those would be those things that are in our self-interest, that will provide our survival. So to be an altruist, that is, to sacrifice yourself for the benefit of someone else, for her, you're sacrificing those things that are necessary for your survival. And so when you sacrifice those things necessary for you to continue existing, that is a move towards suicide, that makes altruism suicidal. All right, so these are the three cardinal values of objectivism. Number one, productive work is purpose. That is, the goal of your life is to realize your potential. Right? And also, you should be the one receiving the benefit from your productive work. Right? So what you do, you should get the benefit of. Number two, you have to be able to reason. Rational thinking is a precondition for number one. You can't do productive work. You can't realize your purpose and your potential unless you can reason. And then number three, the cardinal value of pride. That is, that pride is a good thing. Right, because it is a consequence of you realizing your potential. Right, and these values, again, are both means and end. They are valuable in and of themselves, and they are the means by which we achieve. Okay, so if she had to put people in moral categories, these are the categories she would put them in. First, there are those virtuous people, and those are people who follow that central tenet of objectivism. That is, they seek their own rational self-interest. Right? Your goals, your own happiness is most important, and so you should act. You should make choices with that in your mind first and foremost. Number two, vice. These are the parasites, and I'm going to include a little excerpt from The Fountainhead with Howard Rourke, where he talks about the parasites. Right? Parasites are people who live off of the work of others. That is, they create nothing themselves. They are simply moochers and takers. And then the last is those who are in moral error. And these are people who want to act in their own self-interest. They want to do the right thing, but they choose wrongly, and not on purpose. It's accidental. And this could be, more than likely, Rand would say, from the social pressure to be an altruist, which she, again, wholly rejects. So this is an image from Howard Rourke, and I will upload this little video to so we'll just go ahead and play here Rourkes Defense, and then what I'm also going to do is I'll put up under this particular lesson the Ayn Rand interview, which is quite interesting, from the 50s. So I'll just go ahead and play Rourkes Defense here. Now, Rourke is here on trial for, he is an architect. He built a building, and they were attempting to co-opt, some of the other members of the community were attempting to co-opt his architecture and use it for purposes that he didn't design it for, and so he blew it up. So he's on trial for destroying this building, and this is his defense against the government's case.